Some stories don't make sense. They have pieces that just don't fit. No matter how you turn them, how you look at them, they remain a puzzle with a missing piece. The story of Joshua Maddux is one of those. It's a story that starts with a young man walking out his door and ends 7 years later with a gruesome discovery inside a chimney. And in between those 2 points, there is a void. A space filled with questions that have never been answered. Joshua Maddux was 18 years old in 2008. He lived in Woodland Park, Colorado, a small town nestled in the mountains. People who knew him described him as a free spirit. He loved nature, music, and writing. He was smart and independent. He had a lot of friends and was close with his family, especially his 2 sisters. By all accounts, he was a happy person. He wasn't involved in drugs. He wasn't known to be in any kind of trouble. He was just a young man figuring out his place in the world. On the morning of May 8th, 2008, Josh told his sister he was going for a walk. This was normal for him. He loved to walk in the woods, to be outside. He left the house and never came back. At first, his family wasn't overly concerned. Josh was independent. Maybe he went to a friend's house. Maybe he was camping. But as one day turned into 2, and then a week worry turned to panic. His family reported him missing. The search began. His family and friends looked for him. The police were involved. They checked with his friends. They looked into his life. They found nothing. There was no sign of a struggle at his home. No note. His bank account was untouched. His cell phone went silent. It was as if Joshua Maddux had simply walked out the door and vanished from the face of the earth. For 7 years, his family lived in a state of limbo. Not knowing is a special kind of pain. Every phone call could be news. Every knock on the door could be him. They kept his room as he left it. They held on to hope. His father, Mike Maddux, never stopped searching, never stopped asking questions. He put up posters, he talked to anyone who would listen, but the years rolled on and the trail grew cold. The case of the missing boy from Woodland Park became just another unsolved file. Then, in August of 2015, the story took a dark turn. About a mile from the Maddux family home stood an old, abandoned cabin. It was known locally as the Thunderhead Cabin. It had been owned by a man who died years earlier, and since then, it had sat empty, slowly falling apart. The cabin was a relic. It had a history, but its recent years were just of decay. The owner of the property, Chuck Murphy, decided it was time to tear it down. The cabin was becoming a hazard, a place for squatters or teenagers to hang out. He wanted to clear the land for new development. A demolition crew arrived to start the work. They began dismantling the old wooden structure, and that's when they got to the chimney. The chimney was made of stone and brick, a large, solid column that was the heart of the old cabin. As a worker began to tear it down, he found something blocking the inside. It was a body. The body was decomposed, mummified by the dry, enclosed environment of the chimney. It was positioned in a fetal curl, upside down, with its legs pointing up toward the sky and its head near the fireplace opening at the bottom. The man was wearing only a thermal shirt. The rest of his clothes, his pants, socks, and shoes were found neatly folded inside the cabin near the fireplace. The discovery was shocking. The police were called immediately. The coroner, Al Bourne, arrived at the scene. They had to carefully dismantle the rest of the chimney to remove the remains. It was a difficult and grim task. The first question was obvious: who was this person? Using dental records, they soon had an answer. The body in the chimney was Joshua Maddux, the boy who had vanished 7 years earlier. The discovery brought a terrible end to his family's uncertainty. They finally knew where their son was. But it also opened up a whole new set of questions, each more disturbing than the last. How did he get in there, and why? The official investigation began, the Teller County Sheriff's Office, and the coroner looked at the evidence. The state of the body made things difficult. After 7 years, there was no soft tissue left to examine for injuries like strangulation or stab wounds. The bones were intact, showing no signs of breaks or bullet holes. Based on the evidence they had, the coroner made a ruling. He determined that Joshua Maddux's death was accidental. The official theory went something like this: Josh, for some unknown reason, decided to enter the cabin through the chimney. It was a chilly May day, and maybe he was seeking shelter. He climbed onto the roof, somehow squeezed himself into the narrow flue, and began to lower himself down. But he got stuck, he couldn't go down, and he couldn't climb back up, he was trapped. In this scenario, he would have died from hypothermia or dehydration, alone inside the dark, narrow space. The coroner ruled the cause of death as undetermined, but the manner of death was listed as an accident. The case was officially closed. To many, this explanation sounded plausible at first. It was a bizarre, tragic accident. A young man made a bad decision and paid the ultimate price. The story was often compared to a Santa Claus attempt gone wrong. It was a neat, simple explanation that closed the books on a 7-year-old mystery. But for Josh's family, and for many others who looked closer at the facts, the accident theory didn't just seem unlikely. It seemed impossible. There were too many things that didn't add up. Let's start with the chimney itself. Getting into a chimney from the top is not easy. Many modern chimneys have a cap, but even older ones often had some kind of barrier to keep animals and debris out. The chimney at the Thunderhead cabin had a heavy steel mesh, like a spark arrestor, bolted over the top. To get in, Josh would have had to tear this heavy mesh off first. Could an 18-year-old boy do that with his bare hands, while balancing on a roof? It seems doubtful. Then there was the physical space. Joshua was not a small person. He was about 6 feet tall and weighed around 150 pounds. Chimney flues are notoriously narrow. The idea that a man of his size could willingly shimmy down such a tight space is hard to believe. Many people who get stuck in chimneys are small children. For a full-grown man, it would have been an incredibly tight squeeze. He would have had to contort his body in an extreme way, and this brings us to one of the most bizarre and troubling pieces of evidence: his clothes. Remember, his pants, socks, and shoes were found inside the cabin, neatly folded. The official theory doesn't have a good explanation for this. If Josh was outside, cold, and trying to get into the cabin for shelter, why would he take off most of his clothes before climbing onto the roof and attempting to enter the chimney? It makes no logical sense. You don't take off your warm clothes to go down a dirty, soot-filled chimney to get out of the cold. The act of removing and folding his clothes suggests he was inside the cabin before he ended up in the chimney. And there was more. Inside the cabin, a large, heavy piece of furniture, a breakfast bar, had been torn from the wall. It was found pushed up against the fireplace opening. This is a critical detail. If Josh was trying to get into the cabin through the chimney, why would this furniture be blocking his exit? It's more logical to think that someone used the furniture to block the fireplace from the inside, to prevent someone from getting out, or to hide what was inside. The position of his body also raises questions. He was found upside down. While it's possible he entered feet first and then flipped over while struggling, it's also consistent with someone being put into the chimney head first from inside the cabin, pushed up into the flue from below. The family started to piece together a different narrative. They never believed for a second that Josh's death was an accident. They believe he was murdered. Their theory is that Josh went to the cabin either alone or with someone else. Something happened inside. He was either killed or incapacitated, and then his body was hidden in the chimney to conceal the crime. This theory explains the details that the accident theory cannot. It explains why his clothes were off and folded inside the cabin. He was already inside. It explains the furniture blocking the fireplace. It was used by the killer to seal the chimney after placing his body inside. It explains why a happy, healthy young man with no history of strange behavior would end up in such a bizarre situation. He didn't put himself there. Someone else did. The Maddux family was not alone in their suspicion. A private investigator they hired also concluded that foul play was likely. And over the years, a name emerged. A potential suspect. There was a man named Andrew Richard Newman. He was known to run with a rough crowd in the area. According to several stories that came to light after Josh's body was found, Andrew knew Josh. An investigator found a witness who claimed that Andrew had bragged about killing a boy and putting him in a hole. Another story suggested that Andrew and Josh had gotten into an argument, possibly over a girl. One particularly disturbing story came from a man who claimed he was at a party with Andrew. He said Andrew confessed to him that he and another person had lured Josh to the cabin. According to this alleged confession, they attacked Josh, possibly stabbing him, and then stuffed his body up the chimney to hide it. This information was passed on to the authorities. The Teller County Sheriff's Office did question Andrew Newman, but they stated that he denied any involvement and that his stories were inconsistent. They claimed there was no physical evidence to link him or anyone else to Josh's death. The coroner's report had found no evidence of trauma, like knife wounds or broken bones. And so, the police did not pursue the lead further. This is a point of major frustration for the Maddux family. They feel the police closed the case too quickly, accepting the simple, if unbelievable, accident theory without properly investigating the possibility of murder. They argue that after 7 years of decomposition, the absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. A stab wound to the stomach or an injury from strangulation would leave no trace on a skeleton. The fact that the coroner didn't find trauma doesn't mean there wasn't any. So we are left with two competing stories. One is the official story, a story of a tragic and incredibly strange accident. A young man, for reasons no one will ever know, tried to play Santa Claus and got stuck in a chimney where he died alone. This story is tidy. It requires no further action. The case is closed. The other story is the one his family believes. It's a story of murder, a story where Josh Maddux went to a cabin, met with foul play, and his body was hidden in the most gruesome way imaginable. This story is messy. It's unresolved. It suggests a killer is still out there. It demands justice that has never been served. Let's think about the human element here. Imagine you are Josh's parents. For 7 years, you don't know if your son is alive or dead. You imagine every possible scenario. You hope he just ran away and will come home one day. Then, you get the call. His body has been found less than a mile from your home. He was there the whole time. The grief is immense. But then you are told it was an accident. You are told your fun-loving, intelligent son decided to take off his clothes and squeeze himself down a chimney where he died. It doesn't align with anything you know about him. It feels like a dismissal of his life and a denial of the truth. The cabin itself is gone now. It was torn down and the land was developed. The physical location of the mystery no longer exists. All that's left is the story and the questions. Why would a young man with no signs of mental distress or bizarre behavior attempt such a dangerous and pointless act? If he was trying to find shelter, why did he choose such an impossible point of entry? And why take his clothes off first? The official story asks us to believe in a series of highly illogical and improbable actions. On the other hand, the murder theory, while horrifying, seems to account for the strange evidence more coherently. It explains the folded clothes. It explains the barricaded fireplace. It provides a motive for why someone would be in a chimney in the first place they were put there. The problem is proof. Belief and logic are not the same as hard evidence. Without a confession, without a witness willing to testify in court, and without forensic evidence from the body, a murder charge is nearly impossible to prove. The police likely felt they didn't have enough to move forward. And so, the official record stands. Accidental death. Andrew Richard Newman, the person of interest, has a long criminal history for other unrelated crimes. He has been in and out of prison. He has never been charged in connection with the death of Joshua Maddux. Whether he was involved remains a matter of speculation. The case of Joshua Maddux lingers because it feels so profoundly unresolved. It's a story that sits at the intersection of the bizarre and the tragic. It's the kind of story that makes you check your locks at night, not because of the what, but because of the how. How can something so strange happen? How can the truth be so hard to find? His family continues to believe he was murdered. They have a website dedicated to his memory and to the search for justice. They want the case reopened. They want the world to know that their son did not die because of a foolish mistake. They believe he was a victim of a terrible crime, and that his killer has never been held accountable. The story leaves us in an uncomfortable place. We want answers. We want resolution. We want things to make sense. But the case of Joshua Maddux offers none of that. It just offers a set of facts that point in two completely different directions. One path leads to a strange, sad accident. The other leads to a cold, calculated murder. And since the cabin is gone, the body has long been buried, and the years continue to pass, we may never know which path leads to the truth. All we know for sure is that an 18-year-old boy named Joshua Maddux went for a walk one day and disappeared. 7 years later, he was found. But in a way, he is still missing. The truth of what happened to him in that old, abandoned cabin is still lost, trapped somewhere in the silence between the official report and a family's unwavering belief that their son was stolen from them. And that is perhaps the most tragic part of all. The story has an ending, but it has no conclusion.